What if the rise and fall of an ancient civilization, one that surpassed the achievements of Greece and Rome, was not just a myth, but a reflection of the human cycle of triumph and tragedy? Could the destruction of Atlantis, told to us by Plato, hold more truth than we ever imagined? The Atlantis myth, a story that has haunted philosophers, explorers, and scholars for centuries. But why does this myth endure? How has a city swallowed by the sea remained at the forefront of human imagination, from Plato's first words to the flood of modern interpretations? Atlantis, as we know it, begins in the mind of Plato, a philosopher whose dialogues, Timaeus and Critias, reveal a civilization of unsurpassed power and wisdom destroyed by a catastrophic flood. In those words lies a mystery that has left the world captivated. And today, we seek to understand not just the myth, but the deeper truths it offers about human nature, power, and civilization's delicate balance. In the coming chapters, we will unravel the story of Atlantis, from its origins in ancient Greece to its place in the hearts of modern thinkers, examining the philosophical, historical, and cultural forces that have kept it alive for millennia. We will challenge conventional wisdom, uncover hidden truths, and explore why Atlantis, a mythical place, might still offer valuable lessons today. The story of Atlantis has never been about simple geography. It is about what Atlantis represents, the potential for greatness, followed by the inevitable fall of power. Plato's story was more than a tale of a city lost to time. It was a reflection on politics, morality, and hubris.
But could there have been more to the story than just allegory? Was there a real civilization whose downfall inspired Plato's myth? Throughout history, explorers, thinkers, and adventurers have searched for Atlantis, not just in the oceans, but in the legacies of lost civilizations that disappeared long before the Greeks. In this exploration, we will delve into the true origins of the Atlantis myth, what Plato intended, and what his words might have been meant to convey. We will also examine how this myth has been adapted, misinterpreted, and reimagined throughout history. More importantly, we will explore the timeless lessons embedded in the story of Atlantis, the warning against unchecked ambition, the consequences of ignoring the balance between human knowledge and nature, and the way that empires rise and fall. This journey will take us not just through Plato's dialogues, but through time itself, from the ancient world to modern interpretations, offering insights into how the myth has shaped our understanding of civilization and its inevitable decline. To understand Atlantis, we must first understand Plato's world. Athens, in the 5th century BCE, was at its peak, its culture, democracy, and naval power influencing the entire Mediterranean. Yet even in the height of this prosperity, the city was struggling with internal corruption and political instability, themes that would deeply influence Plato's work.
In Timaeus and Critias, Plato introduces Atlantis as a story passed down by Egyptian priests. According to them, Atlantis existed beyond the Pillars of Hercules, modern Gibraltar, flourishing with unimaginable wealth, technology, and military might. But as Atlantis expanded its power, it fell into hubris. Its rulers believed they were invincible. In Plato's eyes, this is the ultimate sin, a moral lesson for the Athenians of his time. Plato's portrayal of Atlantis is not a literal account of a historical event. Instead, it serves as an allegory for his ideas about ideal governance. Atlantis, with its corruption and hubris, is the opposite of Plato's vision of the perfect state, where rulers are guided by philosophical wisdom rather than greed and ambition. Through this narrative, Plato hoped to warn his fellow Athenians of the dangers of unchecked power, especially after their defeat in the Peloponnesian War. While Plato's intentions remain clear, the myth of Atlantis would transcend its philosophical roots, becoming a symbol of lost greatness, both real and imagined. Over the centuries, thinkers and explorers from the Renaissance to the Age of Discovery would come to view Atlantis as a real place, a lost civilization that could explain the mysteries of human history.
Before we dive deeper into this incredible mystery, I want to take a moment to thank all of our returning viewers. Your support is what keeps this journey alive. But if you're new here and haven't subscribed yet, ask yourself, what are you waiting for? This is the kind of content you don't want to miss, and yet you're still not part of the family? If there's something holding you back from subscribing, let us know in the comments below. We're always listening and would love to know how we can make this experience even better for you.
What if the greatest empire in history was not destroyed by an external enemy, but by its own internal decay, the very flaws of power and ambition? And what if that empire was the future of your civilization, a civilization just on the cusp of greatness? In 430 BCE, Athens stands at the crossroads of history. Its culture, its democracy, its intellectual and artistic achievements have made it the envy of the world. But beneath the grandeur, Athens is racked with internal contradictions. The Peloponnesian War, a savage conflict against Sparta, has brought the city to its knees. Its once pristine democracy has become a hotbed of corruption and inefficiency. Socrates, the man who might have helped Athens find its philosophical equilibrium, is condemned to death. It is within this unstable environment that Plato, a disciple of Socrates, begins to write. The disillusionment Plato feels about Athens' current political system is mirrored by his deep belief in the need for a new vision, one rooted in philosophy and reason. But to make this point, he needs something drastic, something powerful. The myth of Atlantis will serve that purpose. For Plato, Atlantis is not just a lost city, it's a mirror, reflecting the inevitable fate of civilizations that forsake reason and virtue in favor of material wealth and imperial ambition. The lesson Plato sought to teach was clear. Societies crumble when they fall prey to excess, when they let military might and unchecked desires shape their future. But it's more than a political lesson. It's a philosophical statement on the importance of balance, virtue, and the pursuit of knowledge.
In Timaeus and Critias, Plato tells the story of a powerful empire called Atlantis, located far beyond the Pillars of Hercules. Atlantis is everything Athens aspires to be, wealthy, advanced, and prosperous. But at the height of its power, the Atlanteans begin to fall into the trap of hubris, believing that they are invincible. They challenge the gods, and in doing so, they set into motion their own destruction. This isn't just a warning for Athens, however. Plato's allegory transcends time. It speaks to the universal flaw in human nature, the tendency to forget humility in the face of power. Atlantis, then, is not merely a warning. It is an intellectual device meant to show the cyclical nature of civilizations and the peril of ignoring wisdom and virtue in favor of unchecked growth. But was Atlantis real? Did it really exist? Or was it just a perfect allegory? Plato never intended for Atlantis to be taken as a literal history. The Egyptian priests who tell the story of Atlantis in Critias are not just narrators. They serve a dual purpose. On the one hand, they authenticate the story by tracing it back to ancient Egypt, an authoritative source in Greek thought. On the other hand, by using priests as the narrators, Plato distances himself from any direct implication of these ideas. Atlantis's rise and fall, while engaging, are not simply about a lost civilization. They are about how every society, including Plato's beloved Athens, can fall prey to moral decay. So, was Atlantis real? Or is it a piece of philosophical fiction designed to shock Athenians into self-reflection? The answers may be less about the fate of a single civilization and more about the timeless lessons it carries. But in the next chapter, we'll look at how Atlantis moved beyond Plato's allegory to become a global mystery, one that continues to captivate explorers, philosophers, and dreamers to this very day.
In Timaeus and Critias, Plato introduces the myth of Atlantis not as a simple narrative of a lost city, but as a philosophical tool to critique his own society and explore deep questions about the nature of reality, justice, and the ideal state. In Timaeus, Atlantis is described as an island empire far beyond the Pillars of Hercules, modern-day Gibraltar, a land of vast resources and advanced technology. But this technological power and material wealth soon become the very seeds of their downfall. Plato's aim here is clear. The story of Atlantis serves as a reflection on the dangers of unchecked power and the moral decay that comes with it. The Egyptian priests in the dialogue tell the story of Atlantis, claiming it existed 9,000 years before Plato's time, a society founded by Poseidon, the god of the sea. This long temporal gap suggests that Plato was not just recounting the history of a specific city, but rather creating a timeless lesson about the rise and fall of civilizations. Atlantis, according to Plato, was an island far larger than Asia and Libya combined. Its capital city was a circle of concentric rings, an architectural marvel that blended engineering with natural beauty. The capital was located on a central hill, surrounded by canals and gates, with an immense temple to Poseidon at its heart. The sheer size and complexity of this city were meant to reflect the order and harmony that initially governed Atlantis. But the idea was never to glorify Atlantis. It was a contrast to Plato's ideal republic, where cities are built on reason and virtue, not military conquest and power. The Atlantean society was described as highly organized. Its rulers were the descendants of Poseidon, but they were chosen for their wisdom and virtue. Early on, they governed justly and lived in harmony with nature. But as time passed, the islanders' power and wealth corrupted their virtues.
The architecture of Atlantis was not only grand, but symbolic. Plato writes of temples, palaces, and gardens that reflected the harmony between the ideal forms of nature and human design. But over time, as the rulers of Atlantis grew proud and greedy, they lost sight of the balance between nature and reason. The island's expansionism led it to conquer the lands around it, and soon the ruler's focus shifted from wisdom to domination. Atlantis was not just an intellectual utopia, it was also a military powerhouse. Its navy, which Plato describes in great detail, was capable of waging wars across the Mediterranean. Atlantis's army was equipped with advanced weapons and training, and its cities were fortified with massive walls and defenses. Yet this military might also reflects Plato's concern with the danger of imperialism. As Atlantis expanded, it no longer sought peace, but power, losing its moral compass along the way. The fall of Atlantis is not just a natural disaster, it is the culmination of human arrogance and moral corruption. According to Plato, the gods, once supportive of Atlantis, grew increasingly displeased with its rulers. The final blow came when Zeus, the king of the gods, convened a divine council and decided to punish Atlantis for its excesses. In a single night, earthquakes and floods engulfed the island, submerging it into the sea, and with it, all of Atlantis' wealth, knowledge, and grandeur.
The destruction of Atlantis was a divine retribution, a reminder that no civilization, no matter how great, can survive when it strays from the path of wisdom and virtue. This cataclysmic end was not just the fall of a city. It was Plato's ultimate philosophical statement. Empires that forsake justice and reason will inevitably fall. Atlantis, like Athens, was a lesson in the fragility of civilization and the dangers of forgetting the fundamental principles that hold society together. But what if Atlantis wasn't just a myth? What if beneath Plato's allegory there was a kernel of truth about an ancient civilization that truly existed and disappeared? Could Atlantis have been more than just a philosophical fable, and could the lessons of its rise and fall hold the key to understanding the fate of future empires? The search for Atlantis continues, and its mystery remains a symbol of both human potential and human flaw. But what happens when the past refuses to stay buried? What if the greatest empire the world ever knew wasn't destroyed by an external enemy, but by the very forces within it, its own decay, hubris, and unacknowledged flaws? Could that empire have been the prototype for all future empires? And could the lessons of its fall be the key to understanding the rise and fall of civilizations that came after? Ancient Greece had a unique relationship with myth and allegory, using stories not only to explain the world, but to address the fundamental questions of human existence, power, justice, and the nature of the soul. For the Greeks, myths weren't just folklore. They were parables reflecting deeper truths about the human condition. Stories of gods, heroes, and tragic fates conveyed moral lessons, showing what happens when humans challenge divine order or succumb to excess. Plato, however, was no ordinary mythmaker. He was a philosopher determined to understand the nature of reality and human morality. In his dialogues, Plato uses myth, but with a critical purpose. He weaves his philosophical ideas into the fabric of myth, crafting stories that are both thought experiments and ethical inquiries. The story of Atlantis, introduced in Timaeus and Critias, is Plato's philosophical allegory, reflecting his concerns about the state of Athenian society and the flaws of human governance. But as we dig deeper, we must ask, was Atlantis meant to be history, or was it a cautionary tale?
When Plato wrote about Atlantis, he likely drew inspiration from several ancient events and civilizations. One of the most widely cited influences is the Minoan civilization, a Bronze Age culture on the island of Crete. The Minoans were sophisticated, advanced, and powerful, with grand palaces and a flourishing trade network. But their civilization was decimated by a cataclysmic event, the eruption of the Santorini volcano around 1600 BCE, which caused massive tsunamis and destroyed the Minoan settlements. This natural disaster fits Plato's description of Atlantis, which he says was destroyed in one day and night by earthquakes and floods. Could the Minoans have been the inspiration for Atlantis? The geography and disaster certainly align, but Plato's tale is more complex. The idea of a powerful civilization, corrupted by hubris, mirrors not just the Minoans, but other ancient societies, including the Trojan War, an event immortalized by Homer. Like Atlantis, Troy was a powerful city-state, proud and mighty, only to fall when its rulers became too arrogant and war-hungry. Atlantis may be a blend of these real events, but Plato's aim was never to recount a lost civilization. It was to provide a moral lesson for future generations. When Plato's contemporaries read Timaeus and Critias, they weren't just reading a myth, they were reading a philosophical critique of their own society. Athens, in the aftermath of the Peloponnesian War, was struggling with internal corruption and political instability. Plato, a man of noble birth, had witnessed the failure of Athens' democratic ideals firsthand. The death of Socrates, his teacher, was a turning point that pushed Plato to write works that would shape the future of philosophy. To Plato, Athens' democratic experiment had failed. The city, once a beacon of wisdom and rational governance, had become a breeding ground for corruption and self-interest. Plato saw this moral decay mirrored in the rise and fall of Atlantis. Through the myth, he wasn't just telling a story about a lost city, he was giving a warning to his fellow citizens. Empires are fragile, and when they abandon virtue for power, their downfall is inevitable. The question of whether Atlantis was real or merely a philosophical allegory is at the heart of Plato's tale. On one hand, Plato's Atlantis is rich with detail: the geography, the architecture, the military prowess. These specifics make the story feel real, and yet Plato gives us no clear evidence that Atlantis was anything but a metaphor for his concerns about imperialism and human nature. For Plato, the moral lesson was the point, not the historicity of Atlantis. He used the myth to reflect his vision of the ideal state, an organized, virtuous society ruled by wisdom rather than power. Atlantis represents the opposite of this, a society that falls not to external forces, but to internal corruption. Atlantis was, perhaps, both, a reflection of real historical events filtered through the lens of allegory. Plato's use of Atlantis was less about a lost city and more about a lost ideal, a powerful society that, like Athens, had forgotten its roots in virtue and philosophy. As we continue this journey, the question still lingers. Was Atlantis real, or was it just a timeless allegory created by Plato to warn us all about the dangers of power unchecked by wisdom? What truths have been buried with Atlantis, and what secrets remain hidden beneath the waves? Join us as we dive deeper into the search for Atlantis and the lessons it still holds for us today.
What if the greatest empire ever known was not destroyed by an enemy, but by its own greed and hubris, its rulers blind to the consequences of their power until the sea swallowed them whole? What if that lost civilization was not just a myth, but an echo of the Minoans, the Santorini eruption, and the real cataclysm that reshaped the ancient world? The myth of Atlantis has lingered in the collective imagination for centuries, captivating minds from Plato to modern-day explorers. But as much as Atlantis feels like a timeless myth, it may have been rooted in the real world, not just as a philosophical story, but as a memory of a devastating disaster. The theories that link Atlantis to real-world places, like the Minoan civilization on Crete and the catastrophic eruption of Santorini, bring us closer to understanding the ancient memories Plato might have been drawing from. In this section, we explore the most compelling theories that connect Atlantis to actual historical events, beginning with the Minoan civilization, a powerful empire that mysteriously disappeared. Was Plato's Atlantis a symbol of this lost world? And could the Santorini eruption have been the cataclysmic event that destroyed it? The Minoans, based on Crete, were the first advanced European civilization in the Aegean, flourishing from approximately 2000 BCE to 1450 BCE. With their impressive palaces at Knossos, extensive trade networks, and remarkable art and technology, the Minoans were a powerful and sophisticated culture. But their civilization collapsed, likely due to the Santorini eruption, one of the most destructive volcanic events in ancient history.
The eruption of Thera, which shattered the Minoan civilization, fits perfectly with Plato's description of Atlantis, a mighty empire, thriving and advanced, only to be swallowed by the sea in a single disastrous event.
The connection between the Minoans and Atlantis is undeniable in some aspects, especially when considering the naval prowess and wealth that both civilizations shared. But is this a coincidence, or is Atlantis a distorted reflection of the Minoan collapse? Could Plato's tale of a sinking city have been rooted in the real-world catastrophe of the Santorini eruption? The Santorini eruption around 1600 BCE stands as one of the most significant geological events in human history. It unleashed a volcanic eruption so powerful that it sent massive tsunamis across the Mediterranean, devastating the Minoan civilization. Cities were destroyed and thousands of people perished in a nightmarish catastrophe. Could Plato have drawn on this devastating event to craft his myth of Atlantis' destruction? The island of Thera, once home to a thriving society, now lies buried beneath layers of ash. The eruption created such a massive environmental impact that it's believed to have altered the course of history for many ancient Mediterranean cultures. Plato's description of Atlantis being swallowed by the sea mirrors the fate of Santorini. Was the Atlantis myth born from the memory of this volcanic apocalypse? Or is it simply an allegorical tale Plato used to warn his contemporaries about the dangers of imperialism and greed? As we look at these historical parallels, one question emerges. Could Atlantis represent the collective memory of many ancient cultures' catastrophic experiences? The theory that Atlantis may have been composite, a myth formed from various historical disasters, suggests that Plato's tale might not only reflect the fall of the Minoans or Santorini, but could also include memories of the destruction of Troy or other ancient empires lost to time. From the flood myths of Sumer and Babylon to the Greek myths of gods punishing humanity, the narrative of Atlantis appears to tap into a global theme: the fragility of human civilization in the face of nature's uncontrollable forces. But what if there's more to this story? What if Atlantis wasn't just a metaphor or memory, but a warning that echoes throughout history, waiting to be rediscovered? Could the search for Atlantis lead us to uncover truths hidden deep beneath the surface of ancient myths and forgotten civilizations? What if Atlantis wasn't just a myth? What if the great civilizations Plato warned about, civilizations lost to time and nature, are not purely imaginary, but real places that vanished in an instant, their ruins hidden beneath the ocean waves? And what if, hidden in these forgotten places, Atlantis waits to be rediscovered, its legacy shaping the future of humanity?
The myth of Atlantis has captivated explorers and historians for centuries, offering a tantalizing mystery that stretches across time. Could Plato's Atlantis be more than an allegory for imperial hubris and moral decay? Could it be a reflection of lost civilizations, cataclysmic events, and forgotten histories buried beneath the sea? Let's examine the theories that have linked Atlantis to real-world places. Among the most compelling theories is the connection to the Minoan civilization, whose downfall may have inspired Plato's tale of an empire destroyed by cataclysmic floods. We also explore the Santorini eruption, a geological disaster that has been linked to the Minoan decline, and the Azores and Canary Islands, remote islands in the Atlantic that have sparked speculation about their connection to the lost city. But is Atlantis a real place, or just an allegorical warning? The Minoan civilization of Crete was one of the most sophisticated societies of the ancient world, flourishing from around 2000 BCE to 1450 BCE. They were advanced in art, architecture, and trade, with grand palaces like Knossos and an extensive maritime network. Yet, by the mid-15th century BCE, their empire crumbled. What caused their downfall? Many scholars argue that the Santorini eruption, around 1600 BCE,
one of the largest volcanic eruptions in recorded history, played a crucial role in their demise. This event sent massive tsunamis crashing into Crete and disrupted trade networks across the Mediterranean. Could this volcanic apocalypse have inspired Plato's myth of Atlantis, a great civilization lost to floods and natural disaster?
However, there are contradictions between Plato's account and the Minoan reality. Plato's Atlantis was described as a vast island with concentric rings of land and water, far larger than Crete. Some scholars argue that the Minoan civilization was not the inspiration for Atlantis, given the geographical discrepancies. The Minoan collapse was gradual, unlike the sudden destruction described by Plato. The Santorini eruption was one of the most devastating natural disasters of the ancient world. Its eruption, which occurred around 1600 BCE, unleashed catastrophic earthquakes and tsunamis, wiping out much of the Minoan civilization. The eruption left behind a massive caldera, and its volcanic ash blanketed much of the Aegean, disrupting agriculture and creating massive social upheaval. Could this event have inspired the Atlantis myth? Plato's description of Atlantis being swallowed by the sea aligns with the disastrous impact of the eruption on Crete. However, the lack of direct archaeological evidence connecting Santorini to Plato's Atlantis means we must ask, was the Santorini eruption the direct cause of Atlantis's fall, or just one of many real-world disasters woven into Plato's narrative?
The search for Atlantis also takes us to the Azores and Canary Islands located in the Atlantic Ocean. Some theorists have proposed that these islands could be the remnants of Atlantis, particularly because of their location on the mid-Atlantic ridge, where tectonic plates shift and create underwater volcanic activity. Could the geological features of these islands hold the key to understanding the myth of Atlantis? The Canary Islands and Azores are home to unique geological formations that have intrigued explorers. The Azores, with their volcanic activity and isolated nature, could fit Plato's description of Atlantis as a remote, advanced civilization. But again, the key question remains: why hasn't any definitive evidence surfaced to support these theories? As we explore the theories connecting Atlantis to the Minoans, the Santorini eruption, and the Azores, it's clear that the myth is deeply rooted in both historical events and philosophical reflection. Whether Atlantis was a real place or simply a metaphor for human fallibility, the lessons it holds about the fragility of civilization and the dangers of unchecked power continue to resonate today. The search for Atlantis may not have yielded definitive answers, but the questions it raises about lost civilizations, geological events, and human ambition are far from over. The legacy of Atlantis is still out there, waiting to be uncovered. But perhaps the most important discovery isn't the lost city itself, but the timeless lessons it teaches us about humanity's place in the world.
What if Atlantis wasn't just a warning, a tale from the distant past, but an ancient memory, a warning so powerful that it was passed down through generations? What if the truth behind the legend lies not in the mysticism of lost cities, but in the remnants of real civilizations, destroyed by nature's fury, by human pride, by time itself? To understand the legend of Atlantis, we must first go back to one of the earliest advanced civilizations in Europe, the Minoans. Crete, the cradle of the Minoan civilization, was a land of beauty and power, where grand palaces and intricate frescoes told the story of a thriving society. At its peak, the Minoans had a vast trade network, impressive naval fleets, and advanced technologies. Sound familiar? Plato's description of Atlantis as a wealthy and advanced empire mirrors the Minoan civilization in many ways. But then, disaster struck. In 1600 BCE, the eruption of Santorini sent tsunamis crashing into the Minoan coastline, destroying much of Crete's infrastructure.
The Minoans were never the same after the eruption. Could this natural disaster have been the real-world catalyst that inspired Plato's tale of Atlantis? Was it the cataclysmic event Plato described in his dialogues, an island empire brought to ruin in a single moment? But the timeline doesn't match. Plato's Atlantis was said to have sunk 9,000 years before his own time, far earlier than the eruption of Santorini. The Minoan collapse was gradual, not instantaneous. The geographic discrepancies between the real Minoan civilization and Plato's description of Atlantis leave us asking, was the Minoan theory a mere reflection, or was it something more?
The Santorini eruption remains one of the most devastating natural disasters in recorded history. The eruption caused massive tsunamis and blanketed the region in volcanic ash, causing immediate destruction. This event, which may have had a ripple effect across the ancient Mediterranean world, could have been encoded into memory and passed down through the generations as the tale of Atlantis. But was it just a volcanic eruption that Plato used as a symbol? If Santorini's eruption had wiped out Atlantis, why does Plato's story mention that Atlantis was an island in the middle of the ocean, far from the Aegean coast? This disparity leads us to question whether Santorini was the primary inspiration for Plato's Atlantis, or whether Plato was tapping into a global memory of multiple catastrophes that occurred across ancient civilizations. If we turn to the Atlantic Ocean, the search for Atlantis moves far beyond the Aegean and the Mediterranean. The Azores and the Canary Islands stand as mysterious points on the map, where volcanic activity has shaped the land, much like the supposed Atlantis in Plato's writings. Could these islands, isolated, volcanic, and steeped in their own geological history, be the remnants of a great civilization swallowed by the sea? Despite their striking location, the evidence remains inconclusive. No ancient ruins or evidence of a civilization with the complexity that Plato described have been found in the Azores or Canary Islands. And yet, the idea persists: Atlantis as a lost empire, not on the shores of the Mediterranean, but in the heart of the Atlantic.
The search for Atlantis is not just a historical quest for lost civilizations. It is a philosophical journey into what humanity fears most. That civilizations built on hubris, greed, and imperialism can disappear in an instant. Plato's story of Atlantis is not just about geography, it is about ethics, about the balance between power and wisdom. The fact that Atlantis myths appear in cultures from Sumer to Egypt to the Americas suggests that the idea of a lost civilization is universal. It reflects a deep-rooted cultural memory of natural disasters, climate shifts, and the rise and fall of great empires. And so, as we journey into the heart of the Atlantic, exploring the geological anomalies and the mythical possibilities, we are also drawn back to the core of Plato's warning, that without wisdom, all civilizations are doomed to fall. Atlantis is not just a lost city. It is a timeless lesson about human fragility. The search for Atlantis may never lead to a definitive geographical discovery, but the myth itself has already uncovered something profound: the universal story of human rise and fall, the dangers of unchecked power, and the fragility of civilization. Whether Atlantis is real or simply a powerful allegory, it remains one of history's greatest mysteries, one that speaks to the very core of what it means to be human.
In the shadows of Europe's dark ages, a story slumbers, a story of an empire so advanced, so powerful, that it was destroyed in a single cataclysmic moment: Atlantis. To most, it was nothing but myth, a tale to warn the proud. But in the minds of a few, Christian scholars, Renaissance explorers, and ambitious cartographers, it became something more: a key, a puzzle, waiting for the world to unlock. For centuries, the tale of Atlantis remained hidden in the cloisters of medieval monasteries and the dusty scrolls of Christian scholars. As the Roman Empire fell and Europe was plunged into darkness, the myths of ancient Greece and Rome were nearly lost. But in the most unlikely of places, these stories were preserved, not by the hands of philosophers, but by Christian monks who saw the wisdom of the ancients as essential to understanding God's will. Plato's dialogues survived in these quiet, contemplative spaces, passed down through the centuries as texts that were sometimes reinterpreted, sometimes modified to fit a Christian worldview. Atlantis, once a powerful metaphor for the dangers of human pride, became a cautionary tale about the hubris of kingdoms, spiritual as much as political. For the medieval mind, Atlantis was not just a lost civilization, it was a warning about the dangers of man's fallibility, linking it with the Christian fall of man and the destruction of Sodom.
By the time the Renaissance began to stir, ancient knowledge was rediscovered, and Atlantis was no longer merely a moral fable. The age of exploration and discovery rekindled a fascination with lost civilizations. Thinkers like Marsilio Ficino and Giovanni Pico della Mirandola began to revive the philosophical teachings of Plato, and Atlantis became a symbol of human potential, not just a moral downfall. In the age of discovery, the myth of Atlantis, once an allegory, became a real possibility, its lost city potentially hidden in the new lands being uncovered by explorers. Atlantis, now intertwined with the discoveries of new continents, symbolized more than just moral decay. It was a place of ancient wisdom, a lost civilization that might hold the secrets to the mysteries of the universe. With the discovery of the New World, the connection between Atlantis and the Americas became inevitable. Could the vast, uncharted lands of the New World be where Atlantis lay, waiting to be rediscovered? When Christopher Columbus sailed west, he wasn't just seeking new lands for Spain. He was looking for Asia and the riches of the East. But his journey marked the beginning of a new era, one that would forever change the way Europeans thought about the world. Some explorers and cartographers began to link the discoveries in the New World to the ancient myths of Atlantis. Could the Caribbean or the coasts of South America be the remnants of Plato's lost empire? Were the Indians of the Americas the descendants of Atlanteans, preserving their ancient knowledge?
These questions ignited fascination and mystery, leading to expeditions in search of Atlantis, not just as a myth, but as a truth that could be unearthed in the newly discovered lands of the West. Atlantis did not simply survive in the pages of Plato's dialogues. It was reinterpreted, reborn in the minds of thinkers during the Renaissance, and carried forward by explorers and cartographers into the New World. The myth of Atlantis, once a warning of mankind's excesses, became a symbol of human potential and the secrets of ancient knowledge. As the world entered the modern age, Atlantis was no longer a lost city, but a lost idea. An idea that would inspire future generations to question the very nature of human civilization and its place in the world. In the search for Atlantis, humanity uncovered not only the myth of a lost city, but a deeper understanding of its own hubris, wisdom, and desire for discovery. The 19th and early 20th centuries saw the emergence of a profound fascination with lost civilizations, the supernatural, and a deep yearning for understanding ancient knowledge that had been forgotten. It was during this period that Atlantis, the mysterious lost city first introduced by Plato, was revived and reimagined, not just as a myth, but as a real, tangible place with profound historical significance. But as the world entered the modern age of scientific discovery and industrialization, so did a new wave of pseudo-scientific theories about Atlantis, each more speculative and controversial than the last. The revival of Atlantis in modern thought can be traced directly to the work of Ignatius Donnelly, a politician and amateur historian who, in 1882, published his groundbreaking book, Atlantis, the Antediluvian World. In it, Donnelly proposed a theory that would forever alter the landscape of Atlantis studies. He argued that Atlantis was not just a myth or a symbol, but the cradle of all ancient civilization, the source of Egyptian, Greek, and Roman knowledge, philosophy, and technology. According to Donnelly, the Atlanteans possessed technologies that were far more advanced than those of any known civilization, and their fall was the result of a cataclysmic event that left the world in a state of darkness and ignorance. But Donnelly's theory was more than just a simple assertion. It resonated with the romanticism and mysticism of the era, which sought to understand the mysterious origins of human culture and the loss of ancient wisdom. His work was a perfect fit for the Victorian era's fascination with hidden knowledge, the supernatural, and the desire to connect with a golden age of humanity that seemed lost to time. In Donnelly's vision, Atlantis was the beginning of everything, and its discovery would unlock the secrets of the world.
But was Donnelly's theory based on hard evidence, or was it simply a fictionalization of his own fantasies? While his ideas were widely popular, they were also critically flawed. He was largely untrained in archaeology or history, and his interpretations of Plato's texts were selective, often disregarding key details in favor of a broader, more sensational narrative. Yet, despite the lack of evidence, Donnelly's ideas set the foundation for pseudo-archaeological theories that continue to this day. In addition to Donnelly's influence, the spiritual and esoteric movements of the late 19th and early 20th centuries contributed to the revitalization of the Atlantis myth. The most significant of these movements was Theosophy, a religious and philosophical movement founded by Helena Petrovna Blavatsky. Theosophy sought to unite Eastern spiritual traditions with Western occultism, and Atlantis played a central role in its cosmology. Blavatsky and her followers believed that Atlantis was not just a material civilization, but the spiritual heart of humanity, where advanced beings lived in a state of divine harmony. According to theosophical doctrine, the Atlanteans possessed profound mystical knowledge and ancient technologies, and their downfall was the result of moral decay and a loss of spiritual understanding. The idea of Atlantis, then, was not just a warning about the fall of civilizations, it was a spiritual allegory about the dangers of losing touch with higher knowledge. Blavatsky's theories about Atlantis, though mystical, were taken seriously by many early New Age thinkers and were instrumental in shaping the spiritual interpretations of Atlantis that flourished in the early 20th century. These theories linked Atlantis to ideas of reincarnation, cosmic energy, and the belief that humanity was evolving toward a higher state of consciousness, a belief that still resonates in certain circles of New Age spirituality today. The key weakness of these spiritual theories, however, was that they lacked any grounding in historical evidence or scientific verification. They were, in essence, philosophical constructs, based on the idea that Atlantis was less a physical place and more a symbol of divine wisdom that humanity had lost, an idea that continues to resonate with those who seek to find deeper meaning in the Atlantis myth. But as appealing as these ideas are to those interested in spiritual exploration, they offer little more than speculative interpretations of ancient texts and myths. One of the most alluring aspects of the Atlantis myth in the modern era is its association with advanced technologies and hidden wisdom. As the world entered the Industrial Revolution and later the Age of Discovery, many people began to wonder,
Could Atlantis have possessed knowledge and technologies far beyond those of any known ancient civilization? From free energy to cosmic understanding, the idea that Atlantis had knowledge of lost technologies has captivated many minds, especially in the realm of pseudoarchaeology.
Atlantis became associated with an esoteric tradition of knowledge that was passed down through secret societies, mystics, and those who believed that the ancient world held the keys to unlocking the true potential of humanity. Crystal power, ancient wisdom, and sacred geometry were just a few of the supposed remnants of Atlantean knowledge that fascinated early 20th century thinkers. For some, the myth of Atlantis symbolized the ultimate lost civilization, holding the secrets of the universe that modern science had not yet uncovered. But despite these fascinating ideas, the evidence for any of these technologies is lacking. Archaeologists and historians have found no evidence of the kind of advanced energy sources, mathematical knowledge, or technological achievements that the Atlantis myth has come to represent. Instead, these ideas are rooted in speculation and the desire to link ancient mysticism with modern knowledge. The pseudo-archaeological search for lost technologies and advanced wisdom is often driven by romanticism rather than fact. By the early 20th century, pseudo-archaeology was on the rise. Scholars and amateur historians began promoting outlandish theories about Atlantis, often distorting facts to support their claims. One prominent example is the claim that Atlantis was located in the Caribbean or South America, based on speculative evidence such as mysterious ruins or unexplained artifacts. These claims were based on an idea that ancient civilizations, such as the Egyptians, Mayans, or Incas, could have had their origins in Atlantis, but no evidence was ever found to prove these ideas.
This pseudo-archaeological approach not only perpetuates the myth of Atlantis, but it also feeds the desire for extraordinary explanations of the past, which ultimately distorts the reality of ancient history. While the search for Atlantis has undoubtedly sparked interest in ancient civilizations, it has also created a barrier between real archaeology and fantasy-based theories. The legacy of pseudo-archaeology is still felt today. Popular shows, books, and documentaries continue to promote unverified and speculative theories about Atlantis, perpetuating the myth for entertainment rather than based on evidence. But the important lesson here is that, while the myth of Atlantis may continue to captivate our imagination, it should never be treated as a historical fact, at least not until solid evidence can support it. In the end, the modern rediscovery of Atlantis in the 19th and 20th centuries gave rise to a variety of theories, from the esoteric and spiritual to the pseudo-archaeological. Each theory tells us more about the people and societies that revived the myth than it does about the reality of Atlantis itself. The modern fascination with lost technologies, spiritual enlightenment, and mystical knowledge all reflect a deeper desire to uncover the hidden truths of our own existence. However, as we look at the legacy of pseudo-archaeology and spiritualism, it becomes clear that Atlantis continues to be a myth, one that transcends its origins in Plato's dialogues and evolves with the needs of each era. The enduring mystery of Atlantis is a reflection of our own desire to find something beyond the limits of our current understanding, to uncover the truths of the past that have been lost to time, and perhaps to uncover a deeper connection between humanity's present and past.
There's a city lying just beneath our imagination, its ruins scattered across the minds of generations, its secrets whispered from Plato's pages to the far corners of modern pop culture. Atlantis isn't just a myth. It's the fuel of our wildest fantasies and our darkest warnings, wrapped in the guise of a lost civilization, but alive and thriving in ways we least expect. From the moment Plato first introduced Atlantis, the myth began to grow, taking on new meanings, new shapes, and evolving into something far larger than a fallen civilization lost beneath the waves.
Through centuries of interpretation, the once straightforward allegory morphed into something so embedded in our collective psyche that it transcended history, blending seamlessly with our greatest fears and fantasies. By the time we reached the 19th century, Atlantis wasn't just a tale from ancient Greece. It had become the subject of literary exploration, scientific inquiry, and a spiritual symbol for generations seeking to uncover the secrets of the past. The myth of Atlantis found its first great literary revival in the works of Jules Verne. In his 1869 novel 20,000 Leagues Under the Sea, Verne's infamous Captain Nemo seeks out Atlantis, believing it to be a real and scientific marvel rather than just a symbolic story. While Verne's work may seem fantastical by today's standards, it captured the 19th century spirit of exploration, a world where the boundaries between fact and fiction were increasingly blurred, and where the unexplained was seen as waiting to be discovered.
Verne's novel wasn't alone. As the scientific revolution exploded, literature began to explore the possibility that Atlantis wasn't just buried underwater, but had somehow migrated, influencing societies across the globe. Writers like H.P. Lovecraft and Edgar Rice Burroughs expanded on Verne's ideas, embedding Atlantis deeper in the world of science fiction. In their hands, Atlantis transformed from a lost civilization to a mysterious force that shaped the destiny of humanity. As fictional explorers ventured into its imagined ruins, Atlantis became both a literal and metaphorical journey, where the hidden truths of humanity were buried, waiting to be found. But why did Atlantis, once a cautionary tale, become the center of adventure, romance, and mysticism? Could the real Atlantis lie in something more dangerous than an ancient city? By the 20th century, Hollywood had embraced Atlantis as more than just a literary idea. From the golden age of cinema to the age of blockbusters, Atlantis became an essential backdrop in films that combined adventure with the mystical unknown. 1959's The Lost World set the stage for Atlantis-inspired films with its tale of prehistoric beasts and hidden civilizations, but it wasn't until the 1990s and early 2000s that Atlantis truly found its cinematic home. The Disney film Atlantis, The Lost Empire, 2001, took a radically different approach. Instead of relying solely on mythology, the movie reimagined Atlantis as a technologically advanced society, much like Donnelly had suggested in the late 19th century. But in Disney's version, Atlanteans weren't just ancient thinkers. They were scientists, engineers, and explorers who fell victim to their own pride.
The influence of Atlantis in popular films didn't stop there. TV series like Stargate Atlantis turned the myth into a new form of fiction, placing Atlantis within a science fiction framework where it was not only a mystery to be solved, but also a gateway to the stars, influenced by the ancient astronaut theory. In these narratives, Atlantis isn't just a lost city, but a key to unlocking the mysteries of the universe. But as the myth of Atlantis spreads across TV and film, it raises a question. Is the legend evolving into something darker? If Atlantis wasn't just lost to the sea, could it be lost in time, hidden by forces beyond our understanding? The myth's resurgence was never more pronounced than in the world of video games. As technology advanced, so too did the vision of Atlantis in the minds of game developers. From the very first platform games to the massive open-world games of today, Atlantis became a symbol of power, secrets, and the unknown. Games like Assassin's Creed, Tomb Raider, and Age of Empires integrated Atlantis into their virtual worlds, presenting it as a place not only of great wealth and technology, but of mystery, danger, and discovery. In these games, Atlantis isn't just a place to explore, it's a quest. Players aren't just discovering a lost city, they're uncovering ancient secrets that could reshape the very fabric of their reality. These experiences tap into the very desires humanity has had for centuries, our need to explore, to uncover, and to reclaim lost knowledge. Atlantis in video games is not just an adventure. It's the possibility of finding lost wisdom that could revolutionize the modern world. And like its literary and cinematic counterparts, it's a mystery waiting to be solved, but also a trap, as players must navigate the dangers of greed, hubris, and overreach.
But what does it mean that we now engage with Atlantis on our terms, through a controller or keyboard? Does it make the myth more real or more dangerous? While Atlantis has made its way into the fictional realms of literature, movies, and video games, it's also maintained a profound spiritual resonance in the New Age and esoteric communities. Here, Atlantis represents more than just a lost civilization. It is seen as the ultimate symbol of spiritual awakening. For followers of spiritual movements like Theosophy and esoteric Christianity, Atlantis is a paradise lost, where humanity once lived in harmony with the universe, possessing mystical knowledge and cosmic wisdom. These traditions claim that Atlanteans weren't just skilled builders and engineers. They were spiritually advanced beings who harnessed the energies of the cosmos and used crystals, sound, and geometry to connect with higher planes of existence. In the New Age movement, Atlantis is the ultimate ideal, a civilization where advanced beings unlocked the secrets of the universe, and where these teachings could still be recovered through spiritual practices. Figures like Edgar Cayce, a 20th-century psychic, further perpetuated these ideas, claiming that Atlantis was a center of higher knowledge that was lost due to spiritual corruption. Cayce's readings, while controversial, cemented Atlantis's place in the minds of those seeking hidden truths about human origins. But what happens when a myth becomes a spiritual reality? What does it mean that so many still search for Atlantis, not as a physical place, but as a state of being, a reflection of their own quest for self-awareness and higher knowledge? In the modern era, Atlantis has become an increasingly powerful metaphor for environmental collapse and the human condition. As we face the challenges of climate change, resource depletion, and the overwhelming effects of human arrogance, the story of Atlantis becomes less about a lost city and more about a lost civilization's fate as a reflection of our own. Just as the Atlanteans were believed to have fallen because of their hubris, so too might our world crumble under the weight of our own pride, greed, and disregard for the environment. Atlantis now stands as a warning, not just of an ancient fall, but of our potential future. In popular culture, the idea of Atlantis sinking isn't merely about an ancient disaster. It's an ongoing disaster we could all face if we continue down our current path. Atlantis, in this context, serves as a metaphor for the consequences of unchecked human expansion, a cautionary tale wrapped in the myth of a lost civilization, waiting for humanity to learn the same lesson before it's too late. As global crises loom larger than ever, could the story of Atlantis serve as the final warning, urging us to change our ways before we too sink beneath the waves? From the pages of Jules Verne to the flicker of Hollywood, and from the adventurous quests in video games to the spiritual seekers of the modern world, Atlantis has become more than a mere myth. It is a lens through which we see ourselves, our world, and our future. It is a symbol that adapts, growing in meaning, relevance, and impact with every new era. Whether it's used as a metaphor for environmental destruction, a spiritual beacon, or a technological paradise, Atlantis is no longer just a lost city. It is an idea, a mirror to human nature, ever-shifting and ever-evolving, offering us a glimpse of what we could be and what we might lose. The myth of Atlantis has captivated humanity for thousands of years. Born from the pen of Plato, this story of a lost civilization buried beneath the waves has ignited imaginations, sparked explorations, and fueled debates. But when does the search for Atlantis become fantasy, and when does it serve as a warning? The search for Atlantis is not just about uncovering a mystical city lost to time. It's a reflection of our own desire for discovery and understanding, questioning the nature of human progress, pride, and destruction. This journey is not about finding the city of Atlantis. It's about understanding why we keep searching for it and what it tells us about ourselves. Plato's account, written around 360 BCE, is often taken as the first historical mention of Atlantis. But in reality, it's a philosophical allegory meant to warn against the dangers of imperialism, unchecked power, and the downfall of civilization. Plato was describing a paradigm, not a place. Through the allegory of Atlantis, he pointed to the inherent flaws in human societies, their greed, their moral decay, and their tendency to fall from grace. It was, in fact, a reflection of Athens, the city-state Plato sought to reform, flawed, but capable of greatness if it learned from its mistakes. Atlantis is not just a lost city, it's a lost ideal. Plato wasn't concerned with geographical accuracy. He was warning us about the inherent dangers of the human condition, presenting a future where civilizations collapse when they forget the principles of justice, wisdom, and self-awareness. The more we fixate on the geography of Atlantis, the more we miss the deeper message. Atlantis represents every society that has risen and fallen, leaving us to reflect on our own mistakes.
Despite Plato's clear intent, the search for Atlantis didn't stay confined to the pages of ancient texts. As the modern world took shape, pseudo-archaeologists seized the myth, turning it into a quest for proof, a lost world that could provide the answers to our deepest existential questions. They've scoured the globe from the Caribbean to the Mediterranean, offering wild theories based on mysterious ruins, geological formations, and questionable artifacts. But archaeologists argue that the evidence simply isn't there. These claims are not backed by credible scientific research, but rather by speculation and misinterpretations. The Bimini Road and the Yonaguni structures have long been touted as proof of Atlantis, but scientists have repeatedly shown these to be natural formations. The human desire to link these sites to a lost civilization speaks volumes about our willingness to believe in something greater than our present realities. These discoveries, no matter how intriguing, don't stand up to rigorous scientific scrutiny. In the end, the question of Atlantis is not just about the city itself, it's about why we search for it. It's a question that reflects our own fears, longings, and failures. Atlantis will never be found on a map because it is not a place. It is an idea, one that mirrors our hopes for human greatness and our fear of destruction. As long as we search for Atlantis, we are searching for something far deeper within ourselves, the knowledge of who we are and what we might become.
Atlantis, a lost city, a legendary paradise, a warning of human fallibility. The myth of Atlantis has haunted the human imagination for millennia. But what if the story isn't just about an ancient city? What if it's about something far darker? A mirror held up to the flaws of our civilization, reflecting the very pride and ambition that might one day bring us to ruin. What is it about this myth that has captured our collective psyche for over 2,000 years? To understand why Atlantis continues to captivate us, we must first return to Plato's original telling. In his dialogues Timaeus and Critias, written in the 4th century BCE, Plato introduces a powerful allegory. But it wasn't just a story for entertainment or curiosity. Atlantis, for Plato, represented a society of unparalleled achievement, a civilization that, in its height,
had attained extraordinary wisdom and power. But this very strength led to their fall, as their moral decay and hubris turned their greatness into their downfall. Plato's Atlantis was a warning, not about a lost city, but about the fate of societies that lose sight of justice and humility. The Athenian defeat in the Peloponnesian War left Plato deeply disillusioned, deeply concerned with the collapse of his society. The myth was personal, a way of reflecting on his own city's decline and the disastrous consequences of unchecked imperialism and pride. Atlantis, then, is a mirror of our own civilizations, societies that rise, achieve greatness, and eventually fall, consumed by their own greed and arrogance.
The myth of Atlantis has come to represent the ultimate golden age, a time when humanity was at its most perfect, a civilization whose knowledge and achievements were far beyond what we've ever imagined. But here lies the paradox. The myth of Atlantis is not just about longing for a golden age, but about the fragility of that ideal. Atlantis is not merely a symbol of perfection, it is a symbol of a dream that cannot be attained. It is a myth of what could have been and what we might never achieve because of our own flaws. Every society, from the Greeks to the Romans, has looked to Atlantis as the ideal civilization. The question is, why do we still long for a time that is impossible to recreate? Why do we look back to Atlantis, a place of perfection that ultimately destroyed itself, and think we can find it again? Perhaps Atlantis isn't just a myth, it is a reflection of our own unsatisfied longing for a world where we aren't constrained by our own limitations. The most powerful element of the Atlantis myth is not its lost wisdom, but its role as a cautionary tale, a story about the consequences of human pride. Atlantis wasn't destroyed because of natural disaster or external invasion. It was undone by its own people. The Atlanteans grew arrogant and self-serving, believing they were beyond reproach. Plato uses the fall of Atlantis as a lesson in humility, a lesson we continue to ignore. This story of hubris, of human overreach, has echoes throughout history. Empires have fallen because of it, whether it was Rome, the British Empire, or modern superpowers, each at its height, each brought low by its own excess and pride. Atlantis, in this context, is not a myth of the past, it is a warning for the future, one that we would do well to heed as we push further into the realms of technology, climate change, and global dominance.
Imagine, if you will, stepping onto the shores of a forgotten world, where the air is fresh with the scent of salt and flowers, the sun shines brighter than you ever thought possible, and the city before you is a dream realized, a civilization at the height of its glory. Welcome to Atlantis, a place that once lived in the hearts and minds of its people, where every stone, every breeze, and every moment of life hummed with the rhythm of perfection. As you walk along the golden shores, the blue waters of the Atlantic Ocean sparkle, stretching far beyond the horizon, blending seamlessly with the sky. The city of Atlantis rises before you, its streets wide and gracefully curved, laid out in perfect harmony with the land. The roads are smooth, crafted from a material that gleams like marble, yet softer to the touch, an almost ethereal glow radiating from the ground beneath your feet. You pass through gates, towering structures carved from polished stone, flanked by mighty statues, warriors with faces both proud and serene. These statues are not just decorations, but symbols of strength and wisdom, representing the dual pillars of Atlantean society. Beyond the gates, the heart of the city stretches out like an intricate garden, where lush greenery and flowering vines wrap around grand stone buildings, temples, palaces, and courtyards. The walls of each building shimmer with a glowing substance, a mix of precious metals and gemstones, catching the sunlight in a kaleidoscope of hues.
the air smells faintly of incense and fresh fruit, carried by the cool breeze that rustles through the leaves of towering trees. You approach the temples, vast structures that stand as a testament to the Atlanteans' devotion to both the gods and the spirit of knowledge. The columns rise like giants, their intricate carvings telling stories of creation, balance, and the pursuit of wisdom. Inside, the air is cool and filled with a sense of reverence, where light pours through stained glass windows, casting vibrant colors across the marble floors. Priests and scholars wander these halls, their robes flowing as they walk, speaking softly among themselves, consulting the ancient texts stored in crystal-clear vessels. The sound of chanting rises, calming and rhythmic, a connection between the earth, the sky, and the gods that governs the very fabric of Atlantean life. Beyond the temples, you find the palaces, their towering spires reaching to the heavens. Palace gardens are lush and serene, filled with exotic flowers and the sounds of singing birds. Each palace is an architectural wonder, ornate balconies, grand halls, and swimming pools carved directly into the marble, reflecting the surrounding beauty of the city. Here the elite citizens, the rulers, the philosophers, the military leaders, gather to discuss policy, science, and the future of their civilization. The aristocracy mingles freely with the intellectuals, for in Atlantis there is no divide between the pursuit of knowledge and the administration of power.
The streets are alive with the hum of daily life. People of all kinds walk side by side, merchants selling fruits, silks, and pottery, artists painting the likeness of the gods or capturing the perfect sunset, craftsmen shaping metals into beautiful works of art. The Atlanteans are a highly organized society, but there is no sense of hurry. Time here seems to flow slower, almost with intention. Every interaction is marked by courtesy, every exchange imbued with a sense of purpose. As you stroll through the markets, you notice how everything is perfectly balanced. The crops, vibrant grapes, plump figs, and oranges, are abundant, harvested carefully by hands that understand the delicate relationship between nature and civilization. Fishermen bring in the day's catch, their boats carved from smooth, polished wood, their sails embroidered with symbols of prosperity. In the heart of the city, children run in playful packs, their laughter ringing through the air as they chase after balloons, their hands raised to touch the clouds. There is no sense of struggle here, no poverty, no hunger, only a community built on shared wisdom, justice, and a deeply ingrained belief that the earth and the heavens are intertwined in perfect balance. But it's not just the city that captivates you, it's the land around it. As you step beyond the city's limits, you are drawn to the natural beauty of the islands and mountains. The gardens outside the city are filled with exotic plants, some so rare and magnificent that they can only be found here. The air smells of fresh herbs, wildflowers, and the tangy salt of the ocean breeze. The animals here, too, seem to reflect the Atlanteans' harmonious connection with nature. Great birds with iridescent feathers glide gracefully through the skies, while exotic creatures, lions with manes that glow like the setting sun, and giant dolphins that leap from the sea, move effortlessly through the landscapes, as if in synchrony with the earth itself. Everything seems to operate on a higher plane, in perfect harmony with the cosmos. The oceans that surround Atlantis are also home to wonders. Great underwater caves, reef cities, and hidden treasures,
many of which remain undiscovered even by the most curious of citizens. The Atlanteans, in their wisdom, understood the balance between humanity and nature, and they built their world to exist in perfect symbiosis. But as you stroll deeper into the city, you feel a subtle change. The bustling markets are quieter, the laughter of children softer. The air, though still warm and sweet, carries a weight that wasn't there before. Atlanteans, once confident in their power and wisdom, now seem to move with an air of unease, their eyes darting toward one another as if sensing that something they cannot name is shifting.
The temples, once filled with the harmonious sounds of prayer, now hum with hushed conversations about danger, about power, and about control. In the gardens, once a symbol of perfect balance, you notice untended plants, the vibrant flowers of Atlantis slowly wilting, their color fading. The harmony that once defined this civilization is beginning to unravel. You stand at the edge of the city, looking out over the vast ocean, and for the first time, the calm waters seem unsettling, as if the sea itself is waiting for Atlantis to recognize its fatal flaw, waiting for the pride that led to the city's rise to pull it into destruction. The myth tells us Atlantis vanished, swallowed by the sea in a single cataclysmic event. But in reality, the city's end began long before the ocean swallowed its shores. It began with greed, with arrogance, with the belief that no power could match Atlantis's brilliance. And now that arrogance is about to face the price of its hubris. As the sun begins to set over the great city, you take a final breath of the cool, salty air. The city of Atlantis still stands in your mind, alive in all its perfection and its tragic fall. But as the world returns to the present, you're left with the lingering question: what lessons does Atlantis leave behind? Is it a city of dreams, or is it a warning, a reminder that no matter how great we become, we must always be mindful of the balance between humility and pride? With a gentle sigh, you return to the present, carrying with you the image of a perfect world, now only a memory, a myth, but one that continues to shape the way we see our world today. As we journey back from the ruins of Atlantis, through the gardens of its grandeur, past the whispers of its downfall, we are left with more than just the echoes of a lost civilization. Atlantis is not merely a story of ancient grandeur and destruction. It is a mirror, reflecting back to us the essence of who we are and who we might become. A myth born from the depths of the human psyche, Atlantis continues to resonate deeply, speaking to us across time and space. But what does it mean for us today? The myth of Atlantis has endured for over 2 millennia, transcending the limits of time and geography and touching cultures across the globe. Plato's initial description of this powerful civilization has evolved into something more than just a tale of a city lost beneath the sea. It has become a touchstone for philosophy, politics, and morality, a mirror reflecting our aspirations, fears, and hubris. In its earliest days, Atlantis was born of a philosophical need, an exploration of the ideal society, and a warning about the destructive nature of pride. In ancient Greece, it spoke to the collapse of Athens after its own fall from glory in the Peloponnesian War, offering a warning to those who believed that human power was limitless. But over the centuries, as the myth spread across continents, it grew into something far greater, a symbol of lost wisdom, civilization's fragility, and the eternal tension between nature and human ambition. From the ancient Egyptians to the Mayan cultures,
Atlantis became a universal archetype, embodying the ideal of a civilization living in perfect harmony with nature, only to be undone by the corruption of its own leaders. It was no longer just about a city lost to the sea. It was about the rise and fall of all civilizations, a story repeated throughout human history, from the Romans to the British Empire, and even in the ongoing struggles of modern societies. Plato's Atlantis was more than a lost world. It was a metaphor for mankind's journey and its mistakes. Atlantis is, at its core, a philosophical tale, a cautionary warning about the dangers of hubris, imperialism, and the moral decay that inevitably follows the rise of any great power. The city's downfall, brought about by its greed, its excess, and its pride, echoes through the ages, asking us to consider the consequences of our own actions. It compels us to reflect on the costs of ambition, the fragility of greatness, and the illusion of control. In every age, from ancient Athens to the Renaissance, and even in the modern world, the Atlantis myth has evolved into a tool for self-reflection. It is an allegory that speaks to our desire to build something great, but also to the inevitability of collapse when we lose sight of justice, balance, and humility.
In modern times, the myth of Atlantis resonates even more deeply. As globalization, climate change, and technological advancements redefine our collective future, we are forced to ask ourselves, are we headed towards our own downfall? Is the hubris that led to the destruction of Atlantis repeating itself in our world today? Just as the Atlanteans fell prey to their own greed and imperial ambitions, so too do modern societies flirt with overreach. Through environmental destruction, unsustainable growth, and the corruption of global power structures. Atlantis, as a symbol of human pride, speaks directly to the imbalances we face today. It's a story not just about the ancient past, but a living myth that warns us about our future. The environmental collapse that devastated Atlantis mirrors the climate crises that threaten our own world. The hubris that destroyed the Atlanteans echoes in the ways we ignore sustainability in favor of economic gain. The destruction of Atlantis is the shadow cast by every civilization that believes it is immune to the forces of nature and time. But Atlantis also holds out hope. In the myth's idealized version, we see a civilization that achieved greatness, a perfect society that lived in harmony with nature and knowledge. If Atlantis serves as a warning, it also serves as a call to action. It compels us to reflect on the possibilities of what could happen if we find ways to restore balance, to build sustainable futures, to return to wisdom, and to restore the human connection to both the earth and the cosmos. Though the search for Atlantis may never yield a physical city, the myth remains a powerful symbol that transcends time. Atlantis is not simply a lost city. It is a timeless idea, a representation of what happens when human ambition meets its limits. The search for Atlantis, in many ways, is the search for meaning, for knowledge, and for truth in a world that often feels out of control. As modern thinkers, philosophers, and dreamers continue to explore the myth of Atlantis, we are reminded that our quest is not just for discovery, but for a deeper understanding of ourselves. In this search, we confront our own imperfections and blind spots, learning from the mistakes of the past while striving to avoid the same pitfalls. As we bring our journey through the myth of Atlantis to a close, take a moment to reflect on what it teaches us. Atlantis may be lost, but its lessons are very much alive. The city's story is woven into the fabric of human history, enduring because it reflects both our greatest hopes and our deepest fears. It speaks to the promise of greatness and the perils of pride, reminding us that civilizations, like people, can only thrive when they are grounded in wisdom, balance, and humility. As you now return to the present, take with you the wisdom of the myth, that the world, much like Atlantis, is a fragile place, shaped by our choices, our actions, and our ability to understand the forces of nature and society that govern us. Let Atlantis, in its destruction and idealism, remind you that our future is not set in stone, but shaped by how we choose to live in harmony with the world around us.
Now, as the waves of time carry you back from this journey, allow yourself to rest with the knowledge that the myth of Atlantis, like every myth, is not just a story of the past, but a reflection of what lies within each of us, waiting to be understood. As we close the chapter on the myth of Atlantis, remember that its story is far from over. The search for truth, the quest for balance, and the need to reflect on our own humanity, those are the real journeys we are all on. Atlantis may be lost to time, but its lessons are right in front of us, woven into the fabric of our daily lives. So, as you step away from this story, ask yourself, what choices will you make today to ensure that the world we leave behind isn't swallowed by the sea of our own mistakes? Stay curious, stay conscious, and let the myth of Atlantis guide you, not just to ancient ruins, but to a deeper understanding of the world around us and the legacy we leave behind.